Now, Tanya, you are the one, I believe, that you read the book first, and then you told Joni about it, and you got Joni reading all kind of books. Sometimes she's up to the wee hours of the night, and I should be saying, Tanya, quit telling Joni about all these books.
That's my book partner over there.
So, Tanya, you've been a school teacher, and you have a master's degree, and you've been a pastor's wife. So, what is your comment or question for Dr. Rauser today about this book?
Well, I would just say when I read the book, and it's been about a year since I've read the book, but I was so moved by it in that it made me want to have a closer, more personal relationship with the Lord. When he called the Father Papa, you know, there's intimacy in saying Papa. And I would say for those critics that get so caught up in the theology of it, is it, you know, theologically and all of that, to look at the other aspects of the book, at how it talks about healing and how the Lord took him to a place where he could be healed from when his father was abusive to him, and then how he had to forgive the killer of his daughter. But wouldn't you say that that so many people have been helped by this book that we shouldn't get so caught up in, is he trying to make a point theologically?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. What I would say is, I think that he is making theological points, but he's making good ones. And what he's doing is a challenge to me, because as a theologian, I don't get invited to many backyard barbecues, because people think I'm going to be really boring and abstract and dry. And that's typically the way theologians are viewed. What The Shack is actually a book full of powerful theological ideas about who God is and how he relates to us. But it communicates it in a story.
Yeah.
Now, that's what makes it so powerful. And I'm challenged, because when I lecture or when I preach...
That's how Jesus shared the gospel,
that's
with
exactly
stories.
Right. Stories and questions, not lectures.
Right.
The Shack is a great story.
Okay, in fact, the scripture says, "Out a parable spake he not." A parable is a story. Now, I hadn't read the book, but at least as the head of Day Star, I get to ask at least one question.
You sure can.
All right, from the theology standpoint, since I did study systematic theology, there is a criticism by some, not all, that he is depicting the Trinity in the form of modalism. Now, 99% of our viewers don't know what modalism is, but could you explain that just briefly?
Now, modalism is the view that God is not three persons, but one person who plays three roles in history. And some people have latched onto 2 or 3 passages in the Shack that are a little bit ambiguous on that point. So what I do is I try to give a context for those passages, and also say you have to read the book in light of the whole, or read the unclear passages in light of the whole. The fact is that the Shack explicitly rejects modalism. Papa says, "I am not three gods, and I am not one God with 3 attitudes." What you see is Mac throughout the weekend where he's at the Shack relating to God as 3 persons. It's a beautiful depiction of community, because often we think Trinity, oh, that's dry, abstract, 1 equals 3, how do you figure it out? It's a paradox. It's ultimately a community, and that's what the book reminds us.
All right, so I'm saying that people should read the Shack first and then read this as a follow-up to better understand what they just read. Is that correct?
That would probably be the best thing
Okay,
to do.
Joni?
One of my favorite parts in the book is understanding that he really makes it clear that there is life beyond the world that we're living in. And so when he's able to see his daughter and know that she's in a good place, even though he couldn't talk to her, but the Lord allowed him to see her laughing and dancing and, you know, smiling, and he knew she was not in pain, because that's part of the thing he was tortured with, because this man had kidnapped her and murdered her. That was part of the healing process as well, I think, for us to understand that even in those moments of terrible tragedy, that God is still there. What about that part of it?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to approach the problem of evil. One way is as a textbook conundrum. Why does God allow evil? And there's a lot to be said there, but that'll only get you so far. Ultimately, people want hope. They want a God who gives them that hope, who is there with them in their suffering. And that's what the book does. It does talk about why God might allow evil, but it doesn't give the easy answer, but ultimately gives the hope. And Mac does get that glimpse that he will see his daughter Missy again.
And so really the book is a story of redemption.
At its core, it is a story of redemption. It's not an easy one, but it's an honest one.
All right, now how can people, I know Joni's got another question, but how can they get this book, Finding God in the Shack? There's the website.
Yeah, you can go to my website. I'm linking to Amazon. You can go to Amazon or other online booksellers or your local Christian bookstore, and if they don't have it, ask them to bring it in.
Okay, and quickly, I know you actually had a few minutes to talk with the author of The Shack. Give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I love the guy. He gave me a big hug, which apparently he meets everyone with a hug.
Yeah.
And we had a great conversation for half an hour, and he exudes the grace that is in the book.
And his testimony is interesting as well, because he has some hurts from his past that actually, don't you think, played into the story of the book?
The Shack is, in many, it's a novel, but it is a very autobiographical book for Paul Young. And so it gives it an added level of poignancy or meaning to see that he has lived the kind of struggles that he has in that book.
And so your response, okay.
And some more comments. Here's Steve loved the book, The Shack. I've given it to about 15 people to read. Here is someone saying,
From Ottawa, Tennessee.
I saw Paul Young that wrote the book called The Shack, and his testimony was equally powerful. So many that have been blessed and encouraged. And for me, as a creative person and as a singer and a worshiper, I could so relate to the story and see beyond, you know, any kind of theological differences, the good that it could do to help people. So I would encourage you, if you hadn't read The Shack, I would recommend it. And I know you do as well, Randall.
Yeah. Although there are some leaders who have encouraged people to not read it. And I guess that's because of the perceived theological differences. But I'd say this, if it's going to help you, if it's going to bless you, if it's going to lift up the Lord, then I'm all for it. And I think God does come to us in all manners. And so, Father, thank you everyone who's watched today, everyone who's called, who's written, who's emailed. Minister life to them in the name of Jesus. Amen and amen.